This is a brand new 2018 Dodge Hellcat wide body, but this is the car you all want to know about. It's the brand new Dodge Demon, and right here in my hands I'm holding the press kit for the Dodge Demon. And in the press kit, Dodge makes some pretty extraordinary claims, actually 5 of them, including a world record. So let's count these top 5 performance claims down, and let's talk about the world record that car set, and that is coming up right now on the Fast Lane Car. So let's start with number 5, world's fastest 0 to 60 production vehicle. That is pretty crazy. I mean, there's a lot of fast cars out there.
Oh, there are, and there's not too many of them that aren't all-wheel drive, supercar, hybrid type vehicles.
So how fast 0 to 60?
0 to 60 in 2.3 seconds.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't include rollout, which is sometimes a method used in a lot of reporting.
Sure.
So that is truly 0. The moment the car is no longer at 0, we start counting the clock.
Yeah, because when you're on a drag strip, you have that moment before you break the light, and that's the rollout. So a lot of magazines, a lot of people use rollout, and basically that gives you a different time than you do when it's strictly from the standstill.
So if we count that rollout, it's more like 2.1 seconds.
So I guess the reason that you're able to get that fast time is because you've got sticky tires. Talk to me about these Nittos that were specifically designed for this car.
Yeah, very, very sticky tire. Started working with Nitto using an off-the-shelf tire they had, tire size that they had. And we really reconfigured the tire based on what the car wanted. So retuned the suspension quite dramatically, and then the tire construction was worked around what the car wanted, the compound and the construction that we developed.
So that means that the tire was specifically designed for this optimized grip on this car.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
But there's a price to pay, right? It comes in top end speed.
Yeah, so drag radials a lot of times are rated at 149 miles an hour. We wanted to give ourselves more headroom in the quarter mile because we do run 140 miles an hour on the quarter mile. So that was one of the constraints that we gave to Nitto was, look, we need to raise it from V to W to 160A.
What that means is when you get the car, it's limited to 168 miles an hour, unless of course you swap out the CPU, the little control panel here, and then put on the proper tires.
Correct.
So let's talk about the line lock again. So it's very simple. You hit line lock.
It's very simple. When you're in the modes page, you go to drag options, click on the line lock button. Obviously, it's already clicked on here.
Activate line.
Activate it.
Yep.
Put it in drive.
Yep.
Follow the messaging on the cluster. So it says press and hold the OK button. So I hold it, and I let go of the brake, and I've just got the front brakes holding the car. I'm free to start my burnout now.
All right, number 4, world's first production car front wheel lift.
Yeah.
So how'd you manage that?
So that's a lot of grip, and that's a lot of torque.
Is that with those smaller tires in the front?
That is with the smaller tires, but we also can do it with the drag radials in the front.
Okay.
We've got lots of video and pictures doing both with both sets of tires on the car, and that's just putting a tremendous amount of grip to the back of the car to yank the front end off the ground.
How many G's are you getting when you're launching? Is it over 1 G?
Oh yeah. We get up to 1.8 G's at the launch.
Number 3, world's fastest quarter mile production car ever. So what is a quarter mile time?
9.65 seconds. Yeah, so we took a bunch of weight out of the car. We took about 200 pounds out of the car, so that's a huge change in itself. And then we put more motor in the car, so we upped the horsepower significantly from 707 to 840 on high octane fuel. And almost more important than the 840 horsepower is the 770 foot-pounds of torque for getting the car going. We put a different torque converter in the car, so we multiply the torque significantly more with a torque converter. We change the gear ratio, the axle ratio, from 262 to 309. So there's a tremendous amount more torque going to the rear wheels than there are with a Hellcat. But in order to propel the car forward, you got to get that grip that we talked about. So we retune the suspension so that we can get front wheel lift. We transfer so much weight to the rear that allows us to put that much power to the ground and actually propel the car forward.
Number 2 here is highest G-force acceleration of any production car, and you said 1.8, right?
1.8.
Is that the TransBrake? Is that one of the things that enables that?
That is definitely one of the enablers.
And tell me about the TransBrake. How does that work, and what does that do?
So what it does is when you're in drag mode, so we still have 3 modes in the car, street, sport, and drag. So when we go into drag mode, the computers that are involved in the TransBrake activity are all notified, hey, we're ready to run TransBrake. You get messaging on the cluster that says TransBrake is available. What you do to activate it is you grab both paddles simultaneously and pull them back. You then have to brake torque the car up to 1500, minimum of 1500 RPM. And what we're doing with that is we're taking the lash out of the driveline. So we're tightening everything up so there's no lash in the driveline to reduce the impact loads. Once that is done, you release one of the paddles, either left or right, and then you take your foot off the brake pedal. And that's pretty unnerving. You're at the starting line at, say, 1800 RPM, and you actually take your foot off the brake pedal and the car is stationary. And the way that happens is when you're in first gear, you've got 3 clutches in the transmission engaged. When TransBrake is activated, we engage one of the second gear clutches as well, so it binds the transmission. We've over-engaged clutches in the transmission, so it literally locks the transmission. So you're holding it with that extra clutch engaged. When you release that last paddle, that lets go of that over-engaged clutch, and you immediately have the torque. Brake torque it.
Yeah.
Roll in, let go of the brake pedal, let go.
I've taken our Hellcat to Bandamere, so we're at a mile above sea level, so it's going to be significantly faster here.
Oh yeah.
But I've taken it up there, and it gets some competition from Tesla with ludicrous mode.
Sure.
There are guys running STI Subarus with 1,000 horsepower. And the 2 things those cars have in common are they're all-wheel drive.
Yep.
So I guess the question I have is, will this be embarrassed by a Subaru or a Tesla, or is it now set up fully as a drag car that you can go in there kind of with your head up high and
you can? So it's a lot of car.
Yeah.
You've got to get used to the car. Your first time to the drag strip, don't plan on setting records.
I figure that.
You've really got to get used to how the car launches.
It's an art.
It's an art, absolutely. I've got hundreds and hundreds of passes driving these cars. I can launch the car blindfolded. But as a customer, you really need to practice.
And I've heard the TransBrake does take practice. It's not just like launch control where you just hit the brake, hit the gas, and let go of the brake.
Absolutely, yeah. This isn't a video game. This is the real deal. You've got to get some practice. This car will hold its own with those guys.
Good.
This is legit.
Yeah.
But again, some practice is needed for sure.
Yeah, and let's be fair. I mean, this car is going to start at about $82,000 if you can get one.
Yeah.
And a Tesla that has the highest amount of battery power is over $120,000. A built Subaru, it starts at, let's say an STI starts at $35,000, $40,000, but to get it up to 1,000 horsepower, you've spent at least another, $50,000 to do that.
And something tells me you don't really have a warranty.
There's no warranty at that point.
So,
So I think that's important to talk about the fact that this is relatively a bargain, even though $80,000+ sounds like a lot. It's not a lot of money when it comes to a car that can do sub-10s. Yeah.
And so to have a car that you can actually drive to the strip, AC on, get 20 miles to the gallon on the freeway, go run 9s, and then swap the tires back out with the kit that you buy, and drive back home with the AC on. I mean, it's great.
Number 1, highest horsepower V8 ever produced. So the question there, I suppose, is what's the difference between this Demon V8 and the Hellcat?
Well, probably the most obvious is the bigger supercharger.
Yeah.
We went from 2.38 liters to 2.7 liters, so we're stuffing a lot more air into the engine. You know, a lot of the hardware in the engine had to be upgraded as well to take the additional power, the reciprocating assembly, and then the inlets. We've got 2 inlets to the airbox on a Hellcat, but horsepower is airflow. So we've got a big hood scoop now, so we now have 3 inlets to the airbox. That reduced restriction significantly, allows the engine to breathe a lot easier. We run about 3 pounds more boost. We run 14.5 pounds of boost. With all that airflow, air is power. The more air you can pump, the more air and fuel you can pump through the motor.
And then there's another card here that gives you the first evers of the Demon, and these are pretty interesting too. So first ever production car with the TransBrake, we talked about that.
Yep.
First ever production car with drag radials, talked about that. First ever production car with SRT power chiller, we didn't talk about that. What's an SRT power chiller?
So the power chiller, what we do when we go into drag mode, the AC system, it's almost like on a minivan where you've got a front AC system and a rear AC system. When the car goes into drag mode, we've got valves on the AC lines that close the cabin AC off, so you're no longer running refrigerant to the cabin and you're running it to this chiller, which is really a heat exchanger between the refrigerant and the intercooler coolant. So by doing that, we can bring the coolant temperature down below ambient, significantly below ambient.
So you're intercooling the intercooler?
We're intercooling the coolant that goes in the intercooler.
Okay, that's right. I was like,
a little convoluted. But by doing that, we can then put more denser air into the engine and more fuel into the engine to make more power.
And then the last one here is first ever factory car with drag mode suspension. What is drag mode suspension?
So drag mode suspension is the adaptive suspension that we've had for quite a few years now, since 2012, but we retuned it significantly for the Demon such that its focus is on weight transfer.
All right.
So taking weight off the nose of the car, planting it on the rear tires to get grip to the rear tires.
So will a Tesla Model S in ludicrous mode or a tuned Subaru actually beat a Demon on the drag strip? Well, there's only one way to find out, and we're going to take this on the drag strip, and on July 20th we're going to publish that video, so be sure to stay tuned for that. As always, this is Roman reporting for the Fast Lane Car. Check out tflcar.com for more news, views, and of course, Dodge Demon reviews. How cool is that?